Welcome to question 1. So this is on asymptotic analysis, and I just want to parse through the directions and give a little bit of information as to what best and worst case runtimes are, as well as the things you should be considering when you determine the runtime. So for best and worst case runtimes, these are really referring to the properties of the input. So let me just notate that. So these are referring to properties of the input. So for example, if I have a function that takes in an array, let's say of size n, and basically does a for loop through my entire array, checking whether an element is equal to 0, and the moment it encounters an element equal to 0, it's going to return from the function, right? So in that case, the best runtime is going to be when I pass in an array whose first element is equal to 0, right? So if I have this really huge size array, my first element is 0, it doesn't really matter this array size is really huge because it's going to terminate from this function at the first iteration of the for loop. Whereas if it's an array where you either have a 0 at the very last element, or you don't even have a 0 in your entire array, then your function is going to do this entire for loop and is going to result in the worst case of linear traversal. When it says your answer should be simple with no unnecessary leading constants or summations, basically what that means is if you have something like 2 times n squared, this can be simplified to just n squared. And similarly, if you have, let's say, n squared plus 1000n, this is also just n squared, right? Because you can always ignore anything that's less significant than the most significant term. And then also recall the Boolean OR operator short circuits. In other words, the moment it comes across an expression that evaluates to true, it's going to stop and not evaluate any other expression in the OR series. And similarly for AND, although for AND it's going to short circuit when it evaluates the first false value.